Alright, so in today's video we're going to look at some verses which, when taken out of context, are notorious in causing uncertainty and anxiety regarding eternal security, regarding our salvation. And so these verses are found in 1 Corinthians 9, and we'll read verse 24 to verse 27, alright? And it reads, "Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win. Everyone who competes in the games exercises self-control in all things. They then do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. Therefore I run in such a way as not without aim. I box in such a way as not beating the air, but I discipline my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified." And so in today's video, we're going to ask, if we Christians do not run the race well, will we be disqualified? And so one way to investigate this is by looking at what these verses are not saying. So let's look at what it's not about first, alright? Alright, let's do that. So let's make this clear. These verses are not a command or a call to good works or a call to piety in the hopes of gaining salvation or gaining the prize. And when I say the prize, I mean salvation. In fact, the worst translation here is the NIV. As you can see, it's only the NIV that has added disqualified for the prize. No other English translation does that, and even the original Greek does not add that last part, for the prize. So that's a big deal already. But that aside, any interpretation you get that says
Paul knew he had to be careful lest he himself gets disqualified.
And when they say that, they mean he had to make sure he didn't backslide. He had to make sure he wasn't lukewarm. He had to make sure he was confessing his sins and repenting daily, doing his best to keep the commands, or else he may be disqualified. And they go on to say,
if Paul himself can get disqualified, the apostle himself has to be careful not to get disqualified. What about you? How much more care must you take? Work for your salvation.
Listen, if you see anyone use this verse, if you hear anyone use these verses that way, just get away from that.
This ain't it, Chief.
Get away from that nonsense, because that's not what this is about. If you're watching this video, you probably know that salvation is a gift and it's not a prize that we achieve. Salvation is a free gift. Salvation is not a prize. And this is a basic Christian principle, I'm sure. By now, if you've been on this channel long enough, I'm sure you understand that. So basics of basics, right? Always been believe and you're saved. It's not believe and keep the commandments, confess, do your best, and then you will be saved. No, that's not the gospel. That's something else. But it's not the gospel. I'm sure you guys know that, right? The only race you're running, your race begins at the finish line. Christ has won the race, gives you the medal. That's your race. It begins at the finish line. And so that begs the question, what exactly are these verses saying? So let's look at the correct interpretation. Let's look at the context of these verses, all right? All right. So I need you to understand this. Pay attention. The whole of this chapter is about Paul defending his apostleship, defending his work, defending his evangelism, defending how he does things, how he preaches, and why he does things the way he does. That's what this chapter is about. This is not a command, this is not an instruction manual. This is Paul defending his apostleship, Paul defending how he evangelizes, Paul explaining why he does what he does the way he does it. Yeah?
What?
You see, Paul must defend himself because he was not one of the 12. Yeah? Yeah. If you didn't know, Paul was never one of the 12 disciples. He did not walk with Jesus like the 12 did. He didn't see him on the cross. He wasn't with him in Gethsemane. His encounter came much later after Christ has resurrected. And so that's one of the reasons he has to defend his gospel. Because, Peter, James, and John, yeah, they were with Jesus, so we can listen to them. But what about you, Paul? Where were you? So he has to defend himself. Paul also did something strange. Unlike Peter, James, and John, Paul went to preach to Gentiles. And you might think that's not a big deal, but back then it was a big deal. Jews and Gentiles, the two shall never meet. So keeping this in mind, that Paul is trying to defend his job and explain why he does things the way he does, let's pick this up from verse 19 now. And it reads, "For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a slave to all, so that I may win more. To the Jews I became as a Jew, so that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, though not being myself under the law, so that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without the law, as without the law, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ," yeah, the law of the gospel, "so that I might win those who are without the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, so that I may by all means save some. I do all these things for the sake of the gospel, so that I may become a fellow partaker of it." Let me explain what we've just read. You see, he says that he's free from the law of Moses. That's something he's free from. But he puts himself under it for the sake of those who are under it, right? He acts like a Jew for the sake of the Jews, so that he's able to preach to them. That's what it means when he says, "so that I may be a fellow partaker," so that we can share in the blessings of the gospel. For example, if you look at Acts 21:26, you see Paul take part in a purification ritual. Why do you think he's doing this? Think about it. Everyone knows that Paul hangs out with the Gentiles and all that. So when he's coming back to speak to Jews, they will not accept him. They won't listen to him because he's unclean. And so he must go through a purification ritual, right? And he goes through it, yeah? Not because he believes that, there's anything in that purification. We know Paul believes that Christ is the end of the law. He's the end of the ceremonial law. He's the end of the temple system. He's the end of the moral law. We know Paul believes that. But for the sake of the Jews, for the sake of the gospel, he's going to put himself under it, just for their sake. I believe it's also in Acts 16:3 that he gets Timothy circumcised. Yeah? Why do you think he gets Timothy circumcised? We see in the book of Galatians, Paul saying that circumcision means nothing. But he still decides to take Timothy through the process because of the Jews. They don't want any unnecessary barriers, really. Think about it like this. If I went to Saudi Arabia or Dubai, Muslim majority countries, and I go with a shirt like that, the shirt back there, yeah? And that's written, "Jesus loves you." Think about it. That's offensive. I'll get into trouble. Might even get, killed and punished for blasphemy or whatever. Trust me, I know. I learned the hard way. And it's consistent with what Peter says. If you are preaching the gospel, you have to do it with gentleness and respect. And so that's why Paul had Timothy circumcised, and that's why even he got purified, despite not believing in any of these things. So now we come to verse 24 to 27, the big verses, and I read, "Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win. Everyone who competes in the games exercises self-control in all things. They then do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. Therefore I run in such a way as not without aim. I box in such a way as not beating the air. But I discipline my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified." So after he has preached to others, he himself may not be disqualified. Yeah. So who is doing the disqualifying? The wrong interpretation of this will say God is the one disqualifying Paul.
This ain't it, Chief.
If we look at the context of the whole chapter and the verses we read, the one doing the disqualifying will be the Jews. Specifically, in this context, it will be the Jews, the one he's trying to evangelize to. And so that's why he disciplines his body. Think about it. The 613 laws, they are vigorous. So imagine the things Paul had to do. Maybe not eat a certain food, not wear some certain type of cloth, the fasting and all that. The things he had to do just to fit in with this group of people. It took self-discipline, it took self-control. Because if he did do this, especially guys know that he hangs out with Gentiles, they won't take him seriously. As we saw in Timothy's case, if he went uncircumcised, they wouldn't take him seriously either. So it's the Jews who disqualified the messenger. It's not God disqualifying Paul. It's those he wants to evangelize to. Like I said, if I went to Saudi Arabia, in that, it's already a problem. But if I wear what they normally wear, and when I get an opportunity to speak to someone, probably privately, then I can share the gospel and, some might get saved. But for Paul specifically, he has to discipline himself. Yeah, he has to work hard because, trust me, the 613 laws are not easy. And that's his plan. You see in verse 26, he says, "Therefore I run in such a way as not without aim. I box in such a way as not beating the air." That's his plan. He's not doing things haphazardly. He's thought this through. He's thought this is the best way to go forward. Speaking to Gentiles, he becomes like Gentiles, and then he can preach to them. Speaking to the weak, he becomes weak, then he can preach to them. But if you just come, knocking all their beliefs and all that stuff, they'll disqualify you so fast, you won't even get a chance to preach. That's what he was avoiding. And for those who dare use these verses as a way to knock down eternal security, Paul's analogy actually promotes eternal security. Verse 25, yeah? Those who compete in the games exercise self-control. That's the Olympic Games. Self-control in all things. They then do it to receive a perishable wreath. Yeah? But we, an imperishable. We Christians, our salvation is imperishable. We cannot lose our salvation. It cannot be lost. It is eternal. It is forever. So this is actually a bad place to try say that, we can lose our salvation. Try other verses, but this won't fly.
This ain't it, Chief.
Right, so I hope you've seen the context of all this is not about God disqualifying Paul, but him getting disqualified by those he's trying to preach to, specifically the Jews in this context. So whenever anyone tries to use these verses to tell you, actually you can use your salvation and, you're supposed to run the race well and hopefully get the prize at the end or else God will disqualify you, take them to the context because they're completely missing the point. This is about Paul defending his evangelism methods. This is about him defending his apostleship. That's what this context is about. There is no way a verse in the Bible looked at the correct context, especially after the cross, that contradicts the truth of the gospel, that we are saved by grace through faith alone. Yeah, and no one is saved by works. It's not your good works, it's not your good deeds that get you to heaven. No. It's putting your trust in the finished work of Christ that gets you to heaven. There's no verse that contradicts that. As you've seen today, there can only be misinformation and misinterpretation. But there is no contradiction in the gospel. Alright, so yeah, that's it for today's video. That's it from me. That's it from Mini. Once again, I thank you for watching my videos. Thank you for your support in any way, be it likes, comments, or Patreon. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much. That's it for today's video. Remain in grace, my friends, and I'll see you soon. Yeah? See you soon. Remain in grace.